Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Fuhr. I'm a customer success manager here at Bridgit and very happy to have you join here today for our webinar where we have two of our power users from opposite ends of the globes here to give you some tips and tricks on how to best utilize Bridgit. Today we're lucky to be joined by Maleeha Ahmad, lead business analyst at AtkinsRéalis Group, as well as Stephen Barnett, senior business analyst at Sitzler. Today what we're diving into, I'm sure you're curious, one, we want to give you some tips and tricks on how to best utilize Power BI. Bridgit is great at looking ahead and giving you some good forecasting information when it comes to workforce planning, but how does that relate to actuals? We'll also give you some tips and tricks on how to best utilize Bridgit's newest feature set, experience tracking, particularly some tips when maybe you have some gaps in your data and you're not sure on the most efficient way to get it. Without further ado, let's hop into things. So now we have Stephen Barnett, Senior Business Analyst from Sitzler, joining us. I'm super excited to dive into some of your tips and tricks because as your customer success manager, I've seen firsthand how you have really used experience tracking in a really unique way with Sitzler, and really excited to hear some of the tips that you have today. But kind of just to start things off, Stephen, tell us a little bit about your role actually at Sitzler and what kind of led you to working at Sitzler.
Thanks, Courtney, for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just for context, our business was established back in 1976, and we've had some significant growth in sort of the last 5 or so years, and that really forced our hand in terms of some solutions and where we ended up with Bridgit Bench. But my role is a senior business analyst. I was asked to come in and have a look at the data side of things, try to support better insights, reporting, consistency of our data, and I guess to help support strategy going forward. So the general manager, when I came in, said his biggest priority right now was the workforce planning side. So that's kind of what I've focused on in the 6 months that I've been here, and been lucky enough to come across Bridgit Bench, and it's really sort of delivering for most of our requirements. So
Yeah, fantastic. What a good pairing. You come in to basically help with workforce planning, and
yeah.
Bridgit came to be. So, can you tell me a little bit about how Sitzler uses Bridgit today?
Yeah, sure. So again, we basically were it was a spreadsheet focused workforce planning scenario, which is probably fairly typical. And the I guess one of the challenges for us is we are located around Australia and in quite diverse and remote locations, doing multiple projects at any one time. So the workforce planning side was quite a challenge, um, and getting that single source of truth and line of sight across the entire business. So I'll give an example of what we did last week. We had in Australia, the end of financial year is in a couple of days, so we kick off 1 July. So we used Bridgit Bench as a for our project FTE and our costings for the following year. So obviously that's the first time we've done that with Bridgit, and we're just in that process now. So that's one big use case to provide us that insight across the business in terms of our costs, resourcing, potential recruitment. Other areas that we're using it in is obviously to support our scheduling, identifying the right skill sets, the right people that are available at the right time. Ensure we're not over allocating staff into our projects, because obviously we've got the functionality to identify that within Bridgit. We also, the new feature that's come on board, which is the team collaboration feature, has been quite useful, because it is an exercise that you often do when you're preparing a tender, is to understand what's the best team you can pull together, where have they worked before, which projects, and it may be something you could basically speak to your potential client, that this is a team, it's a gun team, it works, look what we've done before. That's a very easy thing to pick up through Bridgit now. An amazing feature that is really useful and will become more valuable as the longer that you use Bridgit, because obviously it picks up the prior allocations in previous projects. So yeah, I'm just trying to think what else. Oh, skills and experience is the other big one. Previously, a significant time commitment was understanding the skills and experience of your staff, and could potentially be quite a manual process to do that and track and keep on top of it. Now it's all seamless. Basically, it generates automatically straight off the resource allocation from your scheduling exercise. So that's a brilliant feature. There is some background work that needs to be done, and maybe we could talk about that later to ensure you're collecting the correct experience in a consistent manner. But if you do the groundwork, that feature is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be making sure to dive into some of the tips you have for some of that collection. But kind of coming back, you talked about building strong teams is really important to Sitzler. Just diving into that, what sort of qualities are you looking for when you are building those strong teams? And what sort of data was really important to get into Bridgit to help with that decision making process?
Sure. Um, so when we started in this journey, one of the things we did was really sit down and think, what are the things that we require from a workforce planning application? I'm not sure if you recall, as I've been involved with you, Courtney, almost from the start, is we developed a suite of business requirements. That what did we want from a workforce planning solution? And I think we hit the magical 100 requirements on the dot, and that covered things like security, capability, ease of use, reporting capabilities, and the like. So we went through that exercise, aligning it up with Bridgit capability. I think we hit about 98% match, which is extremely high for any requirements matching exercise. So it was quickly, I guess, endorsed as the system to go to. But that's the first step. The next step is understanding or working through the data to include in the system, because that has multiple impacts across, the project collection, reporting, what information is available when you're doing your resource selection, and also what skills and experience is collected along the way with the experience tracking functionality. So we looked at, I guess, refining and categorizing our data to a number of key areas: the market sector, the contract types, the tender types, the business units. We streamlined and categorized our project roles, which is obviously the key thing that you're doing in a schedule. You're pulling in project roles. So prior to Bridgit, we had a lot of different and varied project roles, many called almost the same thing, but not quite. So we rationalized that right down. So you have a very controlled, refined, consistent, and common project roles appearing across all the schedules. So that was, that's been something very beneficial. Allows you to compare very easily as well. One of the, if you'd like me to go a little bit more into that experience history side,
Absolutely.
obviously the history is only being collected at the time that you adopt the application. So there will be a challenge there for business to collect the prior history of employees within your business that have been there for some time. None of that history, skills, experience is obviously there. So you will need to go through a data exercise to collect that through various means. It may be through resumes, conversations with staff, but that is quite a time-consuming exercise, and it's still ongoing for us. There's also the conversation about their prior history. What other employers have they worked for? So the data categorization and the types of data is quite important, because as you're going out to staff to collect that, you need responses that can be trackable in Bridgit. So a strong recommendation is get your data categories right up front. So then when you're having those conversations with staff around, well, where did you work and what were you doing, the responses you're getting back are refined and defined according to how you need it. There's a great tool within Bridgit to integrate that data into Bridgit with an upload. But again, that needs to be configured in a way that works and the data is coming through and it all matches. So you get a few data pieces out, it won't accept it. So I guess emphasizing that you need the right data structured in the right way. And so think about your categories and how over the shorter to medium term you would like to report your projects and where you are with your staff resourcing by defining and being really clear about the data that you're collecting.
Since you have done the great challenge of starting to collect data that perhaps was in various places, difficult
Mm.
to collect. Would you have any specific tips now that you've sort of started this process of just how best to do that, or a mindset to have as you're waiting for that
Yeah,
data to come in?
yeah. So I probably didn't follow a little bit of my own advice, so I'll put my hand up for that. I thought I'd captured the data requirements that I really wanted from our staff. But then as I started seeing the outputs appearing in Bridget, it kind of twigged a little bit more that perhaps there's a few more data points I could collect. Um, and obviously, when you turn on experience tracking, you can decide which data points you want to be collected. So, some obvious ones are, well, you want to understand where staff had experience in a certain market, or perhaps a certain project size, or a certain contract type. So, things like market types, when we start seeing the data flow through, you think, oh, well, probably we've missed a few markets. Let's refine and tweak that. So, yeah, just spending that time up front to say, do we have all the data that we really want before we start going to our staff and asking for their insights around where they've had experience around those particular data points. Otherwise, there's a little bit of going back to and forth to rectify perhaps your initial contacts. But that's a process that we're continuing to go through. We probably have roughly 250 staff within the tool itself, which is not our entire workforce. Um, we're only bringing in staff, obviously, that have a role in construction related work where they would be scheduled within a particular project or included within our tenders. So people like me, where that wouldn't occur, I'm not in the system. I'm just there on the side supporting it.
Yeah. I'm curious. I know, having been along this journey with you, how thoughtful you have been of all the data that has come in, all the data you're continuing to collect and bring into Bridget, which I know is hard work. I'm wondering how that use case of bringing all that data, have you seen conversations, or what's the value that's really come from all of that coming in and essentially using Bridget?
Look, I think essentially still in the early stages. So while we started this process and started bringing data in, the initial cut with the support of you guys to bring that initial data dump into Bridget, which was probably around February. Um, that's kind of the start of the journey for everyone else. Okay, on my side, involved for a month or two prior to that, but it's really that first data dump, and then got questions around, well, who should see this data, what permissions level do they need, because that's then about sharing and getting those insights or comments and feedback. So going through that permission structure and working through that, what do people need to see, not to see, create the permission levels, then the invitations for the training and customizing the training, and again through great support from Bridget to work through what that would look like. We've probably, with all of that, it's probably really started to click, I think, with the business and the stakeholders, probably in the last maybe 6, 8 weeks. And it really kicked in when we started using it for the FTE forecasting and budgeting for the next financial year. The amount of activity really ramped up. So that's really only occurred perhaps in the last couple of weeks. So there's real buy-in now, and I expect this is just the start of the journey as we ingrain more business as usual. We perhaps go to some more executive meetings and provide an update. There'll be more questions, ideas, suggestions, and so I don't see we've delivered, we're done, we can move on. I think there will be ongoing assessment as to how we could add further value. As you know, we're looking at an additional module in Bridget Bench, which is in the pre-con phase, and that's essentially to capture the activity in the, bid preparation and the resources that are required to do that work. And bringing in that module really provides your entire life cycle from, hey, we might go for this bid, actually being serious about it, starting putting names and doing the research and putting a bid together, to submitting the bid, to hopefully winning the bid, moving into construction. But what you'll get is a line of sight from one end to the other. In fact, yesterday I experimented for the first time to look at, well, can we bring pre-con and the project work together in a single report to do an analysis of the FTE required from right from day one in pre-con, winning the tender, doing the project right to the end of the project. And I was able to consolidate that really quickly into a single analysis, which we've never really seen before, because often you're quite segmented. This is our tendering process. Okay, we're done. Let's move on to the project. But I was able to present, I guess, a snapshot of the entire life cycle and all of the costs, all of the roles, and all of the resource numbers from end to end on a monthly basis, broken down by role, which was quite powerful. So
Mhm.
I think just sharing that yesterday will probably invoke a whole bunch of questions and ideas and thoughts of what else could we potentially do.
And I'm curious, just kind of diving into that, what did that report look like? Was that generated by Bridget, or did you use other tools to
No,
really
it
help?
was generated solely. Look, Bridget's quite a deep platform, and the more you go in and play, the more you end up finding, oh, hey, we can do this, or I can present the information this way and that way. So that was really yesterday's exercise, was doing that from a couple of questions that was raised by one of my executive, and said, leave it with me. Sort of half an hour later, I've come up with a whole bunch of new data that we really hadn't had, I guess, a deep insight to that in a very holistic kind of way. So I haven't got feedback on it yet, but I think they'll like it.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The other customer we were talking to, I know there's a lot of interesting conversations about what kind of information can you extract out of Bridget, and essentially reports you can make to be having these really impactful discussions. I know, Stephen, you're thinking of lots of ways of how you can even better use Bridget. Have you thought of kind of, I know we've talked about the pre-con module, have you thought of additional customizations or use cases that you want to try out next?
Yes. So one that was on the roadmap was integrating with other systems, and we actually went live. So while it's now pretty much done and delivered, as we've just pushed through an integration with our payroll system. So I just need to validate a couple of additional data points, but I worked with the integration um, person from Bridget, and we worked through setting up an API from HR, and that has just gone live in the last sort of 48 hours, and we've now automated a lot of the mundane manual work that was required until then. And what I mean by that is the onboarding of a new resource from HR, identifying who they are, that it has actually happened, having that conversation, finding out the relevant information, and bringing that into Bridget, and the relevant data points that you've decided are important for a person's profile. So we've identified all those data points in HR, and we've basically automated as part of onboarding. Is it a project role that relates to? Is it the person's position, something that relates to project, and I would be involved in being scheduled into project work? If yes, brings it across, identify all the relevant data fields, and pre-populates the profile for them, and they appear in Bridget. And then the reverse happens as well. So we've worked through a process of, say, termination or departure based on a few key data fields. There'll be a trigger based on the departure date. That'll then flow through to Bridget, populate that there's a flag here that this person may be leaving, whether it's in a week or 3 months time. At least you've got that knowledge when you're doing your scheduling. And then on the departure date, basically that profile then offboards. It's retained in the history of Bridget, but it basically becomes a deactivated profile. So within Bridget, you're not getting a lot of noise around staff that are in the system that really shouldn't be. You're only getting truly available staff, and you've got their complete profiles there that you've obviously already designed through whatever data you feel is important. One of the things that we've incorporated in the profile is to actually, and going back to staff, is asking what were their, or what are some of their profile or project preferences, what do they like to work on, and we're capturing that as well. So, part of that experience and satisfaction from your role is being placed on projects that you're really into, or perhaps not being put on ones that you don't particularly like. It can be another consideration as you're doing that transfer, or proposing someone going to a particular project role. If they flagged, I really love this sort of a project, well, it's another driver. So, well, they're available, their location's pretty good relative to the project. Let's bring them across. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question there. But yeah, so if I haven't, just try again.
No, no, not at all. I would rather take this conversation where it's meant to go. Just in general, any other just quick tips or recommendations that you'd want to like pass along to others, either through the onboarding experience of implementing or tips for using kind of workforce planning? Anything that you have to offer
Yep,
there?
yeah, I do. I've jotted a few down because there's not one is more important than the other, but they're all kind of add to that. Um, okay, lessons learned from me going through it, and the first one's very common is that whole change piece. So I guess just being resilient and consistent, and I just sticking to it. Once the value of the tool and the information start getting out, the journey becomes a lot easier. Involving senior staff from the start in terms of understanding what are the actual requirements of the business, and engaging with the senior staff early on. I even invited them to some of our initial discussions with Bridgit, and also had your account executive provide a presentation of the tool with myself and our executive, well, our construction leads, basically, to give them a real feel very early what this thing could deliver. So yeah, I would definitely use your account executive support to do that exercise. Um, the Bridgit help and support features are super helpful. So that's available within the application itself. I'd recommend going there. A whole bunch of best practices online directly from the tool. The ticketing system, the turnaround time, acknowledgement and turnaround time is very quick and easy. So it, don't be scared to escalate a query or a concern. Done that many times, and has come back and provided me with, I guess, the resolution that I've needed. Um, the training, definitely take advantage of Bridget's training that's offered as part of the package. Courtney, you delivered some great training sessions, and the other tip with that would be to customize it to align with the permission groups of the groups of people that are going to be using Bridgit. Once you've designed what permission levels and the levels of access and capability they should have in the system, to then break those groups up into logical training groups, and then we targeted those groups with specific training that meant something to them. Another tip out of that is to record the training, because that's been a really good resource. A new person comes on board, we provide them access depending on their permissions level. I simply share that training session with the 45-minute or 1 hour training session, and it's enough to get them going. So that would be a big recommendation. The other would be I would appoint at least 2 administrators to the system, particularly, I guess, if you're diverse across the country, you've got that fallback in case of leave. I'm sort of the third until we fully integrate. But I think to recognise also why you'd want more than one is that initial work of going back to the business, and while you've done your initial data ingestion of all your schedules, it's really getting some of those schedules up to speed, because when you tended to use a spreadsheet kind of approach, often it would be a set point in time and they frequently weren't up to date. So there needed to be a conversation with each project, refresh, update, clarify, and that's where 2 admins becomes very helpful, because there's a lot of work to do at that first onboarding step. I expect, so that's all been done now, and I would see as things become more business as usual, the time commitments will certainly drop off. Turn on experience tracking. It's a great feature, captures real-time staff experiences based on the project that they're at, and will pick up all the data points against that person's specific profile automatically, without any work or effort required by the business. So that's a brilliant add-on. Make sure that that's turned on. Be aware that the historic experience collection will be time consuming, but for most businesses, unless they've had some prior system to collect that, we went down the resume route and conversations and we just created a customized template to collect that based on data that aligned with Bridgit. I think it's important to rationalize and refine your project roles before bringing them into Bridgit. So we found we had many project roles that were essentially the same thing but called something slightly different. So we rationalized down and probably cut out 90 odd project roles because there was that overlap. So we have much less, but now there's a consistent look and feel from project to project. There is options there to include specific pay levels for your costing side. I didn't go down that road. One of the reasons is, I guess, when you're starting that integration, the fear level of having people's pay in the system just ramps up a little bit. So until we've got real confidence around the permissions, how it works, what I've gone with is more of sort of generic charge out rates, and that's associated to the person with that role. And that's fine, that's working. It's 90% there. We're not using Bridgit for a profit and loss statement, so you don't need to go down to the cents. It's really for the to give you that insight and really good estimations of your costs. Integration of data. I would look for opportunities to other systems that the data already exists that you can seamlessly bring across. And like I was saying earlier, we identified HR, and that's been able to bring across a whole bunch of profile information. And like I said, we've gone live this week, and it's really streamlined and just keeps a single source of truth without any interpretations required. The data point over in that system is now the data point over in Bridgit. It's a like for like, updated instantly. Happy days. The other one is position titles. We've set up a system within the HR and Bridgit to identify the position titles that we call somebody, like myself, senior business analyst. It will look at that and say, well, that role isn't a role that exists in Bridgit, so none of my details will come across. So there's some smarts there now. So if we get a new person come in and their role is a project engineer, it will seamlessly identify that and say, hey, that's a role that would be included within your scheduling for your projects. So let's bring that profile across, populate it, bring it in. The only thing we need to do is personalize it, look for a nice photo of that person, a professional photo, and we include it in the profile within Bridgit to personalize it a little bit. And we will then also go back to them and say, hey, tell us about your past experience and what are your project preferences. I'm almost at the end of my suggestions. Feedback and suggestions for improvement is something we've been fairly big on. Courtney, I think I've come to you multiple times as I'm diving in and using this thing in a practical way of some areas to say, hey, what about trying this or adding that or tweaking this particular feature from the user experience? It might provide additional benefit, not just for Sitzler, but broadly for your user base. So I've been logging a few of those. Nothing application killers. They're all just looking to bring a really good system to go another level again. That was my 13. Unlucky 13. I should have come up with a few more, but I've landed on 13. Look, there's others that will come to mind when we finish this session, but there's some things I would suggest.
Fantastic, Stephen. I love all of your suggestions. You hope in these sessions, do you have one or two quick tips? I think you take the cake and the award for having 13, and I will consider it a lucky 13 on that front. Thank you. I just want to thank you so much. I think you provided a lot of great insight, a lot of really great tips. Again, just thank you for being such a great customer of ours, and really thank you for taking the time today to be on this webinar, because I think
it's a pleasure.
I know I can even say, even having spent all this time with you, I learned something, and I think folks here will have learned something We are so lucky today to be able to talk to Maleeha Ahmed. She is from AtkinsRéalis Group. She is the lead business analyst there. Maleeha, thank you so much for joining today. Really excited to chat with you about this topic.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Just to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about your role at the company and potentially what led you to working at AtkinsRéalis Group?
My role is called a lead business analyst, and I started with this company as just a regular business analyst, and I was the only one in the company to have this title. Again, AtkinsRéalis, I work for the nuclear division, and they're not, they're more an engineering consulting firm. They're not so much, a traditional business organization where they're selling products or consumer goods. So that was where it was a big difference, where this is all service oriented stuff. And so that's where the business analyst became its own thing. So although it says business analyst, encompass a wide variety of responsibilities that they did not even know what they were going to be. So this role kind of became what it is, with my time being spent here and making it what it is. And so the focus of my role was primarily on the resourcing side. So just like we forecast for budgets, and we figure out what the trajectory is going to be of a business going forward in dollar value, we do the same thing on the people side. Because without our engineers being able to forecast how many we will need on a certain project, we're not able to deliver what the final result will for be in terms of servicing our nuclear reactors. So that's why it is the basis of the dollar value to be able to determine, okay, this is how many engineers a project will need, this is the cost of the project, and this is what we're going to be billing to the client at the end of the day. So it is literally the crux of what how our business operates. So, and that's what it became to be. So in other words, like, although we do see I do see the back end, but we just as much interface with all of our, senior leadership to make sure that from end to end, we are seeing the process through regarding anything related to resourcing.
Which is perfect that you're using Bridgit. That's exactly, you said some key nugget words: forecasting, looking at resource planning. How does your company use Bridgit specifically in your organization?
So, just like you said, Courtney, we use it to build out manpower by body count. So we do have like other applications, like we need it for scheduling tasks, just like MS Project or something that very many common organizations use. One of the applications we use is Primavera, or otherwise known as P6. It's a very task oriented application, so you will be putting in every single task and how much hours that task is required to do. That builds up to how many hours will be billed to the client. But again, that's very detailed level based. It doesn't tell you the name of the person who is going to be doing that task. It's just going to tell you, we need this sort of engineer or whatever, this sort of task to be completed. It might not even detail the type of engineer. They might just be guessing at that point, what it's going to entail. But again, we needed to figure out how much people do we need to hire in the future, because as we are growing as an organization, right, we need to be able to see where everyone's maneuvering, but we don't have everyone's name placement exactly on their project, right? Some resources are being shared, some resources are dedicated, so it really depends on the type of project. But the biggest challenge we were having is, so how we transition them. Like, do functional managers just have this conversation in their head, like, and then just tell the other guy, hey, my guy's available, can you take him on your project? Like, it wasn't happening so formally. Like, obviously we had the task based information, but again, it was all being after Primavera dumped us into an Excel file of all the hours we will need on this sort of task. Well, then they would just formally or informally put like somebody's name there, but it might not be true, right? It'd just be like an estimation of what it might be. So it wasn't concrete in terms of what we were doing this. Was it effective resource planning? No, we were getting by, sure, right? But it wasn't like we had a perfect idea of where the resource was exactly being transitioned from one project to another, other than looking at their actual charges to the project that they were billing to, right? So Bridgit really kind of swept in this, help us get allocation based off of body counts to figure out where people were actually working or intended on being working versus where they were charging. So it really helped with that perspective.
You talked about a lot of challenges before Bridgit. What is one of your favorite feature sets that has made your life easier in using Bridgit?
So, so when we started this first thing, my favorite thing was about the having the ability of different users, right? So obviously, me, I'd be setting as an admin, but like we would be able to think about what kind of users we would bring in. Right now, like in their first round of this, we decided to have functional managers involved to do the assignment of their staff, and the project managers would be creating the demand on the project, that like this is what I need, and the functional manager who was responsible for the report of the people would be responsible for it. So that feature, having different users, giving you different users the ability to do their portion of the task, really enabled like the start of the conversation, because these are all the people that were needed to be involved, but it actually forced them to be putting this into a system rather than having this email conversation on the side.
Absolutely. Really cool to hear about that, like collaboration, the visibility, and what motivated. I know today we're kind of sharing best kind of tips you would have, and what motivated you to start thinking of ways to use Bridgit that really go out of the box.
I think the main thing was like everyone was mainly asking, so what do I get out of this, right? Like, sure, I'm going to be doing all the grunt work, entering all that information into Bridgit Bench, but what does this mean to me? Am I just doing the data entry for this? Like, they wanted to be able to see functional managers, what do I get out of this? Project managers, am I just wasting my time just entering all this information? Is it just for a senior leadership team? Is it just for them to do analysis and figure out the trajectory of how much hiring that needs to happen? But what we had to do was make a business case kind of for each party that was using the application, be like, hey, no, you're going to get this out of this, and actually convince them. That was our biggest challenge, like convincing everybody that this is an important thing, that everybody needs to do it. Without this, we won't have this information because we don't have it anywhere, like in the way that we need it to be. You know what I'm saying? Like obviously we have like hours and stuff like that, but again, that information needs to be in a spot where we can easily access and easily read it. So to take it outside of the box, we had to be able to bring it into a business analysis application, right? And one of them being initially Tableau, then we moved into Power BI. So we really took all the data using the API from Bridgit Bench and dump it into Power BI, because we will be able to see and slice it, dice it in any which way we would like, right? And we needed a lot more detail than the initial interface of the forecasting page that Bridgit offered. So but the API helped us be able to get the information we need for that. And then we were able to build reports accordingly and tailor them to each of the parties.
And what type of information, when you are doing this outside of Bridgit, were you seeking? Or what do these new reports give you further insight into?
So apart from just the API, we also built in charges from Oracle, which is our where our timesheets are kept. So in an organization like ours, we built to clients, right? So every hour that we built a client, that's where we would get paid. And such, wherever, if someone, let's say I was assigned to so-and-so project, I had to be charging also to that project. But sometimes those things are not true. I might be assigned somewhere, but I might be charging in a completely different spot because I haven't been, I have some extra work to do that I needed to wrap up, but that I never got a chance to. So we would be able to see month over month the changes of charges, which we call our actuals, right? Compared to what our forecast was. Like, this is what we thought was going to happen, but this is what actually happened. So bringing two major systems together really helped us figure out, okay, really forecast better, not only fix what we need to fix in Bridgit Bench, but also, okay, well, what's the truth? Like, does this project need more support? Like, what's going on? So it told us a little bit of a better story, but it also helped to course correct along the way, right? So that's why it was really, really helpful.
Awesome. Can you explain to me a little bit of that process of getting those reports? How did it go? Were there challenges? Would you have tips to give some of our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of challenges, I cannot even begin to explain how challenging this is. Probably one of the most challenging data sets I've ever had to work with. And the main reason for this is none of the data that we bring in from our actual charges speak to anything that is put into Bridgit Bench. They're not even one data point is similar. So we had to figure out a way to be able to have at least one common field to be able to connect both things. And again, that was kind of set up outside of both. Like, we had to think of a work breakdown structure and how this would be able to be even connected, right? Because again, Oracle projects, we have a bajillion project charge codes that people charge to, right? And they're charging maybe 1 hour here, 1 hour there. Whereas Bridgit Bench, a person's project is rolled up into like, hey, this person working 50% here, but that 50% accounts for like 20 projects, charges, right? And which ones those are, how are we going to map that? Like, that's why the biggest challenge was figuring out the data connection piece. Like, how are we even going to connect this thing together? And that's where we had the biggest challenge, because our organization is so complex in terms of how our projects even come in, that to figure out a setup for Bridgit Bench was hard for us, because we're not a very simple organization, right? And I would say the second challenge was about recently, well, I'm saying recently, but in the past year and a half, we've had not only AtkinsRéalis people being forecasted in here, but we have people who are consultants and contractors and other third parties that help support the nuclear business also be forecasted into Bridgit Bench, because again, they are doing the work for the business, right? And we need to be able to forecast, okay, well, we won't need these people for the long term, right? They might not be staying on for like forever, but we need them for like a year or 2 years. So how much support do we need from those sort of parties as well? So
I'm so curious. Well done for going through that data mapping and the complexities, because I'm sure, as you're saying, was a huge challenge. Beyond just doing the work, getting in there to figure out what that data mapping would look like, do you have any tips on how people can address that? Because I think that's something we hear lots of with some of our other customers, maybe not as complex business, but how do you connect all of this data? How do you get it talking to each other so that it makes sense?
So the biggest tip I will get into this is you have to literally look at every field that you possibly have on the left side and every possible field you have on the right side, and figure out just the one commonality. If you were to group up any one of these fields, what common group would you come up with, right? How would you divide it in a way if it's not divided this way? Even like ours was even so complex that like Bridgit Bench is percentage based or like people based. Ours is not even people based. We have our metric of unit is completely different. So that was completely out of the picture too. Like, we could not even use that. Like, even like there was nothing we could use. But what we thought of was, okay, well, how can we make it our lives easier so we don't have to enter 1,000 projects into Bridgit Bench, or like I'm talking like millions of projects into Bridgit Bench, and group them up into maybe like, I don't know, 40 different buckets. That, okay, this is the type of work this is, like these 500 projects are working on, these are the type of work of this project is working on, and figure out by either whether it was type of work, whether it was by client. You have to figure out your division that is more common to group up both things. If you figure out the grouping from the left and right side of the equation, then you will be able to create a whole nother field that will be common. So the field may not actually exist in your data set. You will have to create this field on your own, but you will have to do it in a manner that is what I will call grouping, and that will kind of make it simple. And then from there, you can see what other structures you can figure out and separate to be falling under those little categories. And then they'll get your brain turning. And then you're like, okay, I can do this with this, and then I can do this with this. But again, you will find so much complexity along the way. But again, as long as you have at least one common field, you will be able to make this data connect.
Well, well done getting through that process. Even just talking through it sounds like
I
a
feel
lot
like
of,
I'm getting heated up just because it was so
yeah. Obviously, all that work came together because you guys saw the value in having these type of reports. what's been maybe a use case that brought you the most value? Do you have a story you can share? Or just what insight has it really given you by having this extra process as part of your workflow?
Yep. So I think the biggest thing was people felt like what I meant by people is all our project managers, slash maybe even functionals, right? Like some people have like 80 people reporting to them, okay? They know there may be names, but they actually may always not know where they're working, right? And they will like, yeah, I know this guy's going here and this guy's going there, but at the end of the day, they don't have any tangible data in terms of figuring out, okay, so what's actually happening, right? On ground. This is what I'm forecasting to happen, but what is actually happening on ground, those two completely different things. I think that is the biggest takeaway that I would get out of this is that it has tremendously helped solve, okay, how can we course correct along the way, and it helped those parties to kind of understand, okay, this is where this group is working, or this is especially for the functional managers. And same thing with the project. Do I really need 30 civil engineers on the project when my actual charges are only showing like 18, right? And so what that means is that is my project becoming delayed because I have less people, or I may be able to get the work done? That means I don't need to go hire for 12 more engineers. I don't need to be filling that. And that's what that really means. And again, if you're seeing a lot of overtime charges on the projects, right, you will see that in the actuals. Well, then you definitely know that you need to hire more people in that, in the engineering category or whatever the case might be, right? So again, the biggest thing was we're able to actually tie it back to reality. Yeah, sure, forecasting is amazing, but it's only a guess of what's happening, right? But you need to be able to always check to see are you even in the right direction. And I think this sort of reporting really helped us get there.
Yeah, sounds like it's had a huge impact. You're not doing guessing anymore. And I
Oh
think
no.
you're able to generate really good discussions. I'll always say people are really complex. Our data is just there to help generate good conversation about the people that you need. Now, I know you put a lot of work into this type of reporting, so maybe this question is going to have an interesting answer. But do you have any kind of additional customizations or use cases that you're thinking you want to try out next with Bridgit?
Um I'm not and customizations that I want to add in. So I reached out to Arlene about the hire tag, and that was one of the biggest issues that we were discovering too. That like how can we differentiate between people that we're actually going to hire versus a need for a role that could be internal in the company, and that was the bigger. And now we have even bigger problems. Like we are trying to hire like external people. So how do you differentiate that too? But at least we're able to identify if we need to go outside, what do we do? We are able to differentiate that now using that hire tag. Again, we haven't built it in because it's a recent field or anything like that. So that's a possibility that we're thinking, okay, maybe we can engage, HR a little bit more, and at least because where we were doing was we were manually putting in the requisition that we open in like Workday. Workday is where we were doing our talent acquisition. So putting that into the role description. But again, if they do it in the wrong format or they don't put it with the same number of spaces or whatever it might be, like you won't pick it up, right? And if it's not the first thing that they've written on it, we won't pick it up, right? So at least in that hire tag, we're able to now also get the description in that, so that's amazing. So at least we'll be able to say, okay, if we have, let's say, 300 requisitions open for hire, does that match up with 300 unfilled roles sitting in bench? That is something that I want to be able to build in. But again, like that requires we have to train people and also build it in, which will also take time and all of that stuff. What challenges we will come out with that. But that's something I'm looking forward to building. I don't know how fast we will be at that. But again, we just got to this point and I'm like thankful that because we had to not only do this once, we had to do this twice, right? At least for AtkinsRéalis, like we did it one round and we did another round, so that's why I'm like fully exhausted on this front.
Yeah, I know we're always looking ahead. Well done on the customization you've already brought. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're just so happy to hear that our tool is helping, again, bring your team lots of value, helping with the business, helping generate good discussions about your people. That's wonderful. Any last, I'll leave it just open-ended. Any last things that you want to share based on your experience with Bridgit for other customers?
Um, I think Bridget, from again, our experience has been a little bit more complicated, only because we are a complicated organization. But I promise you, any other organization I've worked for in the past, like it has, I think it would work very seamlessly with that. So, um, and even if you are a complicated organization, there is a way to simplify things. There is a way to make yourself so like unravel the complication. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. I think Bridgit Bench forced us to think more simplistically in terms of our resourcing, because you can always complicate things. You can always have an exception rule to every rule that out exists, right? So I think that's what it forced everybody. And I swear to God, I believe that our organization structure also changed recently because of the fact that we want people to be assigned based off of body counts rather than hours, even though we're a consulting organization. Mind you, if we were not a consulting organization, if we didn't have hours to charge, if we were like, a consumer packaged goods company that don't have to fill timesheets, it would be so easy for them to implement this, right? But it's when your livelihood is tied to the client, right? Them and the hours that you charge to them, the billable hours. So that's where it becomes complex, but I believe everything can be simplified only if you think of it that way.
Such an interesting use case. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk through everything. I'm actually excited to really continue learning how you guys continue using Bridgit and it providing all of that value for you. Again, Maleeha, just thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Again, incredibly insightful and appreciate you sharing a little bit of this experience at AtkinsRéalis Group. Thank you for spending the time with us today. And of course, thank you to our guests for their interesting perspective. If you have a tip or trick or any suggestion that you want to share, feel free to reach out to your CSM or, of course, just reach out to our general team. Thanks again for spending time with us, and we hope you have a great day.